Right, guys, welcome to a very, very special Two Watch Collection episode. Richard Benc, founder, friend, studio Underdog. How are you, sir?
I'm good, yeah, thank you for having me.
Pleasure, boy. Thank you so much for coming up. You've come up from Brighton for this, and you've come up to London, so thank you very much.
Yeah, you've made that sound like a trek. It's an hour on the train. Like that's most people's commute, so, yeah.
We were just discussing before we started filming when we first met. Now, I cycled over here. I line biked it over. I had an hour to consider what the hell we were going to talk about today. And I was trying to think, okay, so 2020, you had some time on your hands to think about launching the business, but you actually launched Studio Underdog in 2021. So we met in 2021, late 2021. You had actually launched the brand. So you had a product out there.
I'd launched it, and yeah, I would have fulfilled. I think I did the first fulfillments from September, but I don't think I'd done the second batch by then. So yes, certainly the brand existed, but it was in its infancy, and I was, trying to get guidance and advice from industry experts, which is...
You're scraping the barrel, clearly.
Which is why I
scraping the barrel.
Slid into your DMs, see if I could,
What I wanted to do though, Rich, was I wanted to get an insight into your mind. Because we know a lot about Studio Underdog, we know a lot about the product, but today's not about that. Today is about getting into your mind. It's about getting into your design head, your inspiration, what it is you like in watches, when you got into watches, and also through your watches.
Right.
If that makes sense. So I think you can tell, I don't know if you agree, but I think you can tell an awful lot about someone through their watch.
How disappointed would you be if I rocked up with two Studio Underdog watches? I'm happy to say, I have watched a couple of the previous episodes you've done, and everyone does seem to cheat a little. Everyone brings more than two watches.
I'm prepared for that.
So I have done that. I've got a couple of extra, but for the most part, we're sticking with two, and not a single Studio Underdog on my belonging today.
Really?
So yeah, we've got a...
Well, I didn't ask for that, just to be clear. I did specify to the team that I wanted two watches that you owned, that you put money down on the table for yourself. And I just think that'll be, I hope that it's going to be interesting for people, because at the end of the day, we know a lot about the brand, we hear a lot about the product, but we don't hear much about you. So tell us, how did you get into watches originally? And when did that tipping point, when was the impetus to say, you know what, actually, I reckon I could do something here?
So I think, most people, when they sort of discover watches, it's when they're handed down a watch as a child. For me, other than rocking, I think, a fake Baby G as a kid, I had no interest and really real knowledge of the watch industry until my mid-20s, really. And that was through a job. That was through, my education in design, moving to the big city, trying to get a design-related role in London. And the first one that I managed to secure was designing watches. Which we'll loop back to, because I've actually brought with me the first watch I've ever designed, but that's a sort of a party bag piece. We'll end on that. Maybe that will help. What's the word? Keeping viewership up towards the end.
Or holding everyone there, keeping you guys with us for the next 30 minutes.
In your head there. So that was it. It was kind of, I stumbled into the industry as a designer, and through that just fell in love with the industry, started collecting watches. My collection, like everyone as they're starting out, varies and is very much widespread, from vintage pieces to micro brands to horology, the main Swiss houses. So I've settled on a couple that actually I've even surprised myself with what I've brought here. I've had to do a little bit of revision as well. As I was on the train up, I was kind of trying to read up on the watches I own, because I come at it from a design perspective. That's what draws me to watches. And I've seen some of the guys that you've had on, and it's a very technical conversation.
No, it's not. It's absolutely not.
I watched a Tim Mosso video to buff up on it.
Do you know what? Who doesn't?
It made me feel worse.
I do it all the time.
It was, he was talking a foreign language to me. Yeah. He's incredible. But I'm looking forward to your feedback. Did you find watches, before we get into the watches, did you find watches to be intimidating from a design perspective? Because they are very different, though, to, very different, of course, to most things, be it chairs, furniture, buildings, cars, whatever it may be. I'd say intimidating, no, but a challenge, yes. And that's actually what was appealing. I kind of realized after the fact, as I said, I stumbled into the industry, stumbled into this job, and it was, everything sort of clicked into place, because I've always gravitated towards designing small objects, because then the devil's in the detail. It's all about those refined choices that you make. So as soon as I was designing watches, I was in heaven. I really enjoyed that challenge and appreciated that challenge.
And when I say different, I should have said different because they're so intimate in the way that they are on us,
Yeah.
and like almost unlike anything else. Right, let's dive in here, Rich. What have you brought with you? So let's kick off with your first one. Where in the journey, where did this feature? Was this early? Was this mid? Was this recent? And why?
All the watches that I've got here are relatively recent, but they've got a similar approach in terms of what's drawn me to them is the design, right? So the first one will start.
Did it come from Subdial?
It did indeed.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, it came from your friends, our friends at Subdial.
Fantastic.
So this was a pickup last year, I think about a year ago, I'd say, and it's got a fair bit of wrist time. So this, I'll let you sort of do
Bloody
the.
Now this, so I didn't know what was being bought today. Hand on heart. There were a few names thrown out there by Matt, our friend who was organising this film, and one of them was one of the brands that was thrown out there was Breguet. Now I had no idea what to expect. Truly, I had no idea what to expect. But this is as quintessential Breguet as it gets. This is wonderful. What was it that attracted you to it?
So there's a lot of weird stuff going on with this watch. What attracted me to it was, as I said, the design. And the reason for that is, for me, there's so many unique design elements to this watch. Things that on any other watch would be the focal point, right? You've got the Breguet handset. You look at the mid case. It's got such a cool coin-edged, typical Breguet. A ridiculous crown that on any other watch would be the feature. The lugs, kind of goofy.
Yeah.
But it all works together, in my mind, to create like a beautiful dress watch. The funny thing about this was, so it's a mid-90s watch. This was meant to be both a sporty dress watch, which I think is hilarious because that is sort of a juxtaposition in itself.
Is it screw-down crown?
It's not a screw-down crown.
It's got the marine. It's part of the marine family.
Exactly.
But you'd immediately think it's a classique.
Yeah, exactly. You look at the marine family now; it's a very different beast.
Bulky.
Yeah. So this is mid '90s. So you've got a lot of the design hallmarks of Daniel Roth and when he was there.
Yeah.
He obviously, I think, left in the 80s or something, but
This was slightly later.
Some of the design stuck around for
Exactly. And it's all there. Size-wise, it's quite sort of quite petite, 34, 35 mil.
Yeah, I think 30. If Tim Mosso serves me right, 35.5.
35.5. Bloody hell!
Yeah.
I thought it was only Langer that gave point MMs. Really stunning. And I guess you've got the gear share, you've got Roman numerals on the dial, which is fairly divisive. I mean, I'm not a huge Roman numerals fan, but actually, I've always appreciated them on here.
I think this is what I'm saying. All these weird and wonderful design choices somehow work together so cohesively. Everyone that I've shown this watch to, and well, everyone that's actually asked me about this watch just loves how it looks. And really, that's kind of the first check in a box when you're looking at watches for yourself, your own collection, right?
Would you share this? Would you have shared this with some trusted confidants before making the purchase? Or are you instinctive and you trust your gut that you see this, I know it, I love it, I want it?
I'm pretty instinctive. I think typically I like to sit on a purchase decision for a little while, similar to a design process. Sometimes it's better to get a design to almost 90% there, stick it in a drawer, forget about it, come back to it, because if it still resonates with you, that is part of the process, right? And it's similar to picking up a watch in my mind as well. I used to really kick myself when I was studying at uni, where I'd get a project, or even some of the early designs, I'd get a project to 90 to 95% there. It's a few more hours away from sending it off to suppliers to start getting sampled, and I'd forget about it, and I'd come back to it 3 months later, and I'd be like, what on earth have I been doing? Why hasn't this moved ahead? Now, maybe it's a justification to myself. Now I consider that part of the process, right? So I think it's a similar thing here. This one, when watches go on the Thursday drop on Subdial, often they get snatched up. So I really only had, I think, a week or so to pick this one up.
Did you try it on before you bought it?
No, I didn't. No.
Do you want to put it on just to see it? You didn't try it on.
I didn't.
That's
no.
interesting.
Yeah, yeah.
Where are you on date windows? Because that's got a date window at 6.
Where am I on date
Where
windows?
are you in date windows? Because it's one of those things in the watch world that's obviously very divisive, and to me can make or break the design. As a non-designer, they can make or break the design.
So, especially when it's at 6, it's symmetrical, so that's always quite easy. What I don't like is when a design is done first, right? Basically, I think if you start from the movement and then design the dial after that, you can make a lot more design choices based on the location of that date display. So this one, you can see it fits perfectly exactly where a Roman numeral would be. I think you often see some designs where it'll be placed between, how do I describe it? Between two dials, if it's a multi-layer dial. And that's what throws me. So effectively, I feel like the watch here was designed based on having the movement first, and that's what I quite like. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Did I explain that right?
Yeah. It's not jarring at all. I find that to be immediately appealing. Also, the way they've sort of given you a bit of a window, they've provided it a frame for the date. In some ways, what I find quite jarring sometimes is when you've got real step down, when there's a real depth between the dial itself and the date, whereas that feels like it's quite seamless. We should talk about proportion, because being not a huge watch, but it fitting you perfectly, that's something that really irks me. It's something that keeps me up at night. Is have you got a watch that is proportionally right for you? We haven't yet got to a point where you can go in and have your watch measured up for you in the same way you would for a suit or a pair of shoes. But it'd be quite satisfying to know that, at least to know you're creeping outside of the parameters. 46 mil could be a little bit big for you personally. It might not be big for The Rock, but it might be big for you.
A 46 mil would certainly...
For you, I'm thinking that's the spot on size. I mean,
it is.
Up to 37, 38 for a dress watch might be the very biggest I'd go. I mean, just proportionally. But is that how you feel?
Yeah, so I think my sweet spot is around 35, 36 mil. That's just personal preference. I've got relatively small wrists. The biggest watches that I own really are around 39. I don't like to go beyond that. Fine, sometimes it's more about the lug to lug, but certainly, especially when it comes to a dress watch as well, it also depends on the style of watch. If you're wearing something maybe more sporty, you might want to go a little bit larger. But for me, and part of the decision of seeing it online and making the call there that I wanted it was, I knew a 35.5 watch is a sweet spot, and it's going to work for me. So yeah.
And of course, it comes down to material as well. I mean, being something like this in titanium just feels different on the wrist, even though it is slightly larger.
I like that it's petite, it's light when you look at it, but actually solid case back, yellow gold, it's got some heft to it.
Yeah.
Even the buckle, that's got some heft in itself.
Would Studio... Oh, God, I've got so many questions here. This is my first one. Would Studio Underdog consider acquiring Breguet? Because Breguet needs some love. Everyone in the watch world knows that Breguet is probably the great opportunity in all of watchmaking.
Breguet right now does feel like the underdog, right? And you are rooting for the underdog.
Yeah.
I think every enthusiast is wanting to see Breguet winning.
Yes.
We're at a point where we can reap the rewards, where you can buy a 90s Breguet and it's not going to necessarily break the bank compared to the retail value of Breguet now. So I do think everyone would like to see Breguet win.
What would you do?
Oh,
if you were leading Breguet now? As a CEO yourself?
That's a big question.
This was not part of the prep.
What would I do? I'm really drawn to their classique range as well. I think a lot of the decisions probably would be less focused on on design to an extent, and it's more about the brands, how they connect with the community. I do think they've got the community support.
It's interesting because that's what Studio Underdog, looking in out from the outside, Studio Underdog does very, very well. Is you galvanise the community. You're in the community. You're not external to it. You're actually part of it. Whereas Breguet has this amazing product, amazing history, but it is so separate. It is so outside of its own community. It makes it actually quite sort of detached and unapproachable, which is really interesting. I think that's just about to start changing. They've got new leadership there, new CEO who I think is quite passionate about bringing people in.
Fingers crossed.
We'll see. Is there anything in this design that inspires you for your own design? I was going to ask.
Not directly, but again, going back to there's so many unique design elements to it that standalone would be the main feature, yet it works cohesively together to feel somewhat understated. And I feel like that is a design challenge that I want to emulate. So I wouldn't necessarily pick certain details, but it's the thought process that I really respect here and that resonates with me. It's just, look at that crown. It's ridiculous.
What does it remind me of? It reminds me of like a lipstick or a little rocket.
It's so cool.
And it's proper oddball because it is somewhere in the middle there. It's between two families. What was going on in the business at the time that made them think, actually, you know what, a sporty... Something I've actually considered, I've thought about more recently is like taking, say an ellipse case, a really elegant dress shape, but giving it a screw-down crown. Yeah. Saying to someone, actually, you can go and do all those things with this. I mean, the Elegant from F. Pigeon is attempting that in some way to be an elegant design, but not mechanical, but something you can go and do everything you want with. It's an interesting thought. Cool.
In your mind, what makes this sporty? Because until I was doing my revision on the train here, I felt like this was as classic as a dress watch got. How does this fit in the marine? How does that fit in the marine category?
I have no idea. Apart from the crown, immediately when I saw the crown, I thought to myself, that is not part of the classic family. It immediately I thought marine, but apart from that, there is nothing. I mean, it's not a screw-down crown. There's nothing there that says sporty to me.
I feel like that maybe also represents its time as well. It's a little bit confused.
But you can imagine, if you're marketing that, we're talking about jet set kind of characters on the Riviera. What is sporty? I mean, we got to quantify what we mean by sport. We're not saying go out and do an Ironman in it.
Yeah.
We're saying maybe jump off the yacht with it. In less than 5 meter depth of water. And it's good for coverage with sun cream, that type of sportiness. That type of activity.
And then it's coming on an alligator strap, It's
but in some ways it sums up what we love about watches, which is a contradiction on bizarreness. I love it.
It's
brilliant.
Confused.
God, you're a rich Benc. Christ Almighty. Does anyone out there know that you own a Breguet? I mean, that is a story.
Well, actually, So Andrew Morgan was trying to pick this up days after I grabbed it, and he saw me at an event, I think a Time and Tide event, and I was wearing it. And he came up to me and was like, "This was meant to be my watch."
You're the bugger who snapped it. Snapped
which actually made me feel good because it made me sort of feel like, okay, I've definitely made the right choice if someone as like-minded as Andrew Morgan would be after it as well.
I think he ended up going for another one. He ended up going for that incredible value proposition, which is a traditional, but that sort of open worked with the at 12 o'clock the little miniature sub dial at 12. Which is a traditional, but I think it's 38 mil in another insane pickup value-wise. I mean, we're not investment advisors here, but Breguet of that era has to be considered
Who knows?
A worthy cause.
I'm going to stay out of investment
I love the
advice.
fact you've got one, Rich. I should be giving no advice to anyone about investment. Right, Breguet first up. What's next?
So we'll go to a 0.5 watch. Got a watch on my wrist. So I'm left-handed, so that's why this one's bare.
Okay.
But this is my most recent pickup.
Okay.
Right? So I don't know if Matt gave you a heads up on this. No? Okay.
How long are we talking recent? Because I know you guys were in town literally last week looking at watches.
We were looking at watches.
Was that a pickup?
That was a pickup day.
Wow.
Yeah. So this is a brand that you know well.
Christ almighty. I didn't expect that.
Yeah, there you go. Another gold watch. Another 35 mil watch. So
it fits you like a glove.
It does fit me well. I thought that it's not too blingy, right? 35 mil. I came home and Emily, my wife, was like, "That is a very blingy watch." It's like, fair enough. It is a solid gold.
Where is she? She's not come along today to defend herself. I'm not going to push back on her too much, but I disagree. I entirely disagree with her. Have you ever disagreed with her before?
Plenty of times, but that's what makes a strong marriage.
I entirely agree. I do not think that's blingy. I think that's incredibly understated. I mean, yes, it's a solid gold watch, but to me, the bracelet's quite subdued. It's got its polished center links, of course, but brushed predominantly. A Royal Oak bracelet tends to sing in a way that can be sort of a bit more blingy. But wow, geez, Rich, I didn't expect that.
So I'll tell you what sort of drew me to this one. Obviously, Genta design,
yes.
Right? The worst kept secret at Watches and Wonders a few years ago was that the Angenoux was coming back, right? Everyone was talking about it. And I had my heart set on picking one up if it was in sort of vintage size. And I really didn't think at the time that they'd introduced one at 34, 35 mil. I thought the reality was if they were to do one at that size, it was going to be a ladies version. Maybe they'd do a 36, and I was happy with that. So when it released, the first Ingenieur, or the reissued Ingenieur a couple of years ago, it was in 40 mil, and that was too big for me. I didn't like some of the design decisions as well, because the original in around 34 felt like it had been scaled up. So we're talking about the date window. I think the 40 mil had a small baton, which in my mind felt like they were trying to force a movement into this dial design. So I had my heart set on waiting until they released what I assumed would be a 36. So when this year the 35 stainless steel black dial Ingenieur was introduced at a slightly cheaper price point as well from that of the 40, I was like, great, this is a no-brainer. My mind is made. And then I saw this shiny number, and this I felt like it was the kind of fuck you twist, right? I was being so purist in terms of, no, Gerald Genta would have wanted it to be 34, 35 mil stainless steel sports watch, and I'd stayed true to all that logic. And then I saw it in rose gold. Yeah. I was like, it's just too cool. This maybe isn't what Genta would have wanted, who knows? But I think it captured a lot of hearts as well. This was one of my hero pieces across all brands for Watches and Wonders. Yeah. So had to pick it up.
So I was there for the launch of this in Milan, actually, and this was on a gentleman's wrist. So they actually, for the first time, it was during Milan Fashion Week, and they had models coming out wearing them, and a gentleman was of a very similar physique, actually, to yourself, was wearing one of these, and it looked brilliant, absolutely brilliant on him. And it's the first time, actually, from my side, the media side, I'd ever seen a launch where the watches were being worn. We only have them presented to us. Yeah. They're never being worn in front of us, which I thought was really, really interesting. And it looked brilliant. And the same sort of colorway on the dial, there's something punchy whenever we see that, where we see the case color and material replicated again on the dial. Just fantastic.
It's cool, right?
Absolutely fantastic. So got it from the Bond Street.
Yeah. Carrie looked after us.
Carrie's brilliant, absolutely brilliant.
So this is my first venture into IWC, really.
And it's so well finished. I mean, if you look at the case itself, you look at the bracelet, it's really, really, really well done, and it's rock solid in the hand. How does it feel on the wrist? Because that is quite a.
It's heavy. You know, it's.
You're aware of it.
But it's 35 mil, so I still think compared to a yellow gold 44 mil beast of an offshore or a Sky Dweller, whatever. Yeah. This does feel a little bit more understated.
Agreed. And I've got to say, they've done an amazing job on, and I don't think they get enough credit for this, but the brand DNA that's gone on the journey of the launch of the Ingenieur. Yeah. It's been incredible. Yeah. They really went back to basics, product-wise, they went back to what really worked, but the way it's been communicated, it's been standout, I think.
And I think, that's what I'm buying into as well, is sort of the design story, and that's what they did a really good job of communicating. They've done quite a cool video talking about sort of Genta and his life and his process that was super engaging. So it's nice.
There's the F1 movie coming out literally this week, next week.
Yeah.
And they did an insane, every so often, and I've been lucky enough over the years to produce bits for them, including a Kurt Klaus documentary last year, mini Kurt Klaus, which was one of the great honours of my career. But they come out with these over-the-top cinematic films every so often, and they've just done one with Genta's wife talking about, and it's a dramatised thing about the launch of the Ingenieur being the greatest failure of the brand, and how they put it on the wrist of drivers. Yeah. Fuck, amazing bit of work.
So this was a 0.5. This was the 1.5. So this one doesn't count. Should we move on to watch 2?
Yeah, I was gonna say that looks like it's got some patina to it, a little bit of age.
This is a little bit of a battered box. So if in my mind, I thought this was pretty old. This is mid 90s. This one goes back to the 70s.
Okay,
right. So I've got a couple of vintage watches. I know nothing about vintage. I'm not going to try and pretend. It's literally
very few do.
Design is what I'm drawn to. So there's not a huge amount that I can tell you about this. other than it looks cool. Okay, so this is from.
I know the watch. I know it.
You know the watch.
I know
Oh,
it.
great.
I've sniffed around over the years. Really cool.
So you can educate me then, right?
Is it the Conquest?
It is. Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
Shit, how did I get that? It came to my mind. Not much does come to the mind, but it did.
Nice,
It just
nice.
came to me. The Conquest, mono pusher, chronograph, and they did one for the Olympics.
This is the one. Yeah. So
Is it the one?
this is the
Bloody
one.
hell! I wasn't prepped either. Christ Almighty! And the
Nice.
colours, just even from here, popping like nothing else. The orange is just wonderful.
Listen as well. Listen, or I'll do it
Go
on
on,
there.
do it in there.
Go on, put it against your ear. This is kind of the John Mayer moment. You know, what does he say? A crunchy movement.
Or the Goldberger, crispy,
Yeah, crispy.
crispy. That
So yeah, this
satisfying.
is
That
from
so
from
good.
the Olympics.
It's the Olympics. It is the Olympic, and it looks to me, not that I'm a vintage expert, that looks like new old stock, sir.
New old stock.
That's new old stock. Wow, that is spectacular.
So you know, there's a couple of things that I like about this. It marks a moment in time. 72 Olympics. I've kind of been learning and reading up on actually what happened during those games, which is really interesting. But also the design details, the color, the fact that it's a chronograph. You know, the
It's no longer new old stock.
the sort of the imbalance on the dial as well. It sort of
It's
being a
asymmetric.
big eye, which obviously I can appreciate.
Oh, it's absolutely a joy. Where'd you get it, Rich?
So I picked this up from Bowles Timepieces, so a Bristol-based dealer.
Okay.
So yeah, again, didn't have too long to think about it because sometimes if something catches your eye, it's
got
also caught someone else's
Yeah,
eye.
yeah.
And so I moved relatively quick on this, and I think he said by the time he chipped it, a couple of other people had inquired. So I'm glad I did.
It's almost got a sandblasted case, hasn't it?
Yeah, yeah.
And then you've the polished sort of flanks, the side case.
I really like as well the case back, the sort of black infill to highlight all the details.
Definitely sort of a vintage feel to that, isn't there? That sort of feels like it's, and sort of just quite bold, like it's not too designed either.
Yeah.
And then in that centre, you've got the rings and the game's logo itself.
I also think when watches are done as sort of, I guess, a collaboration like this or for a particular event, the fact that it can be quite refined. It is reserved on the case back. If you saw the front side, it's not got the Olympic rings slapped on the front. So I kind of like.
Why do we get it so wrong now? Why do big brands particularly get it so wrong now? Because this was done so elegantly. Whereas now when we see collaborative watches like this, it just feels like their option would be, maybe it's more commerciality now. Like slap it on the front, slap the thing on the front.
It's a good question. I think you're probably right. I think it comes down to maybe commercial people making design decisions. That can often lead to just slap two things together, you know, and ship it. Whereas this does feel a little bit more refined, a bit more thought through.
It's absolutely spectacular. It really, really is. The colours, Longines, of course, have an amazing history. You know, for proper hardcore collectors, it's slightly earlier than this, before the 70s, but into the 50s. Incredible watches that were up there in a lot of people's minds with the very, very best. And by all accounts, because I did a project years ago producing a little book for them of the oldest watches that they asked the community to send them the oldest watches they could, and they were all pocket watches, and their archives are insane. They've got some of the most amazing archives in all of watches, apparently. So this baby will feature, and it was a limited edition of some kind. No, do we know the number? I can't remember.
Gosh, it must have been. No, there was a few different color
Colours,
variations, and you know, when it comes to Olympic sponsorships, there's one company that dominates. So this was, I guess, a bit of a blip in a way. I'm not sure if Longines sponsored further Olympics. So yeah,
it's really great. Do you know what I love as well? Is I love the combination of their logo there, that sort of not the logo they use anymore, I don't think, and then this beautiful scrolled Conquest here at 6 o'clock, which is so small and so elegant that it's actually quite hard to read, but it's really just beautifully done.
I feel like that kind of mixture of fonts as well is kind of, it feels like a modern trend. But this is a watch that's from the 70s.
So you've got the one thing that strikes me is, and Matt did mention this to me, is that you as a designer like sharp angles. Is that true? There's something I'm noticing here is you quite like the purity of clean lines.
I mean, I think, yeah, absolutely. I think one thing that I'm always drawn to is different types of finishing as well. So clean lines, is part of a design process, but also a clean line gives you an option to have two very different surface finishings. So, I mean, the Ingenieur, you've got this perfect, you know, polished polished chamfer and super fine brushing, that always is a winner for me. And I take so much, even though my watches, Studio Underdog watches, are very modern at a glance because of the use of colour. There's so many design elements and choices that are taken from vintage watches, watches from the 60s, from the 40s. So I think that's what I gravitate towards, older watches for. So whilst I may not be able to tell you the intricacies of what movements have been used, what the power reserve is, any sort of technical elements, how many jewels, what draws me to them is the design decisions that create that product. And the reality is that is the first point of call as to what draws you to a watch. So
and as you've touched on it already, particularly with that RWC, is it's all emotion at the end of the day. We can tell ourselves lots of stories in our mind about the history and the provenance, the reason for wanting it, but actually when you get the damn thing in your hand or on the wrist, you're like, I'm putting that all out the window. Throw that all out the window. I love
That's it. So storytelling is critical as well. And storytelling sometimes can be the fact that you bought it and you wear it for a special occasion, that becomes your story. Or it can be a story of the watch. Me sort of learning more about the 1972 Olympics because of this and imagining that this watch was on people's wrists as they're spectating. It's a chronograph, so they're timing the 100-meter sprint. It's a bit of a throwback, and that's that story as well.
Must be quite satisfying when do you ever, on a quiet Sunday night after Antiques Roadshow and Songs of Praise, sit at night and look at your three next to each other? Because it is a satisfying lineup, because the whole idea of the two-watch collection, I think this is the reason I started it, was that sort of there is no right answer to start with, but it's an endless debate. And you do cover all bases, right? You've got three here, but they do cover. And I think three probably, we start to creep towards the point where, yes, you can actually cover almost every base with three. Two is trickier for the super geek. But these three, they really are just a lovely mix of different things. You've got a different feeling for each of them.
I must admit, when it came to picking the watches, I wasn't really coming at it from an approach of if it was just these watches, because then I might have picked different watches that I probably would have gone for a Studio Underdog Watermelon and, my Rolex Datejust, and that probably would have been a slightly less interesting episode for most. So I've broken the rules to an extent, but certainly was able to talk about what's drawn me to these
But
ones.
they work together. That's the thing. They work together. There's a consistency to them. And I know I've just done an episode talking to a collector about that idea of what does collection consistency mean to you? I know for me, it is something, because I want to look at them and feel that, yes, there is a coherency to what you've done here.
Can I now break that consistency?
Yeah, tell me.
So we've got two gold watches, one stainless steel. I've actually...
Oh, Christ, he's whipping something out of the back pocket.
One more.
He's gone for a fourth.
One more.
Crikey Moses.
This is a plastic one. We won't spend too long talking about it, but it's an interesting part of my history and my storytelling. So this bad boy, this was the first watch I ever designed. So a bit of a throwback and something that is part of my story. Interesting complication with shoots a disc. So there you go. So you've got two gold, stainless steel, and one chunk of plastic there.
Is that bioceramic? Is that bioplastic? A Swatch.
I wish I could advertise it as such, but
So how did you get how did you end up with this?
So this was, as I said, when I took my first steps into the watch industry, as it were. This is where I started. So this was not, it wasn't lavish. And to be honest, even me saying that I designed this is probably an overstatement. It was a case of I had pre-approved assets from Minions and a watch template, and I was more or less dragging things across. But this was where it started for me in terms of, whilst I was designing watches, I was learning more about other brands and other watches, and that's where quickly I started to fall in love. So within about 6 months of designing this, I was, looking at picking up a Black Bay 58. That was my kind of first big pickup. So this is where it all started.
And was this a success? Did it go to market?
It went to market.
Really?
Yeah. So this one actually, one of my customers heard me talk about it on a podcast and went through the depths of the internet and managed to find one and sent it my way. So
this has come from them.
This has come from them.
You didn't get one at the time.
I didn't get one at the time. Well, I didn't particularly, believe it or not, think that this was going to be a significant milestone of mine.
Having a 2-year-old daughter myself at home, I can tell you Minions delivers the goods.
Yeah,
incredible recipe for success. And Wow, look at that. So you pull both of those there. You pull.
I think just
sides.
the one on the left side there. There you go.
Wow. So what does this do?
I have no idea. I don't think
So
it does
the
anything.
right side's completely redundant.
Totally.
Just balance. It's about design.
Yeah.
It's all about design.
All about design.
Rich, on that note, thank you so much for it. Lovely to chat. Thank you so much.
Cheers.
Guys, as always, thanks for joining us. Please leave your comments below for Rich. We will read them and we will respond to them, no matter how hostile they may be. Until next time, goodbye.
Good.
Yeah.